Hi, and welcome to today's session where I will give you insider tips for increasing your NetSuite productivity. I will show you dozens of shortcuts and suggestions to share with your team, including navigation, saved searches, best practices, and making NetSuite easier for everyone. I'm Juanita Potgieter, and I head up marketing at Verde Group New Zealand, an Oracle NetSuite partner. Before we move on, note that the content in this video is intended for information purposes only and correct at the time of publishing. Statements in this presentation relating to Oracle and Verde's future plans, expectations, beliefs, intentions, and prospects are forward-looking statements and are subject to material risks and uncertainties. Now, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today so that you can share it with the rest of your colleagues. Now, let's jump into kind of why we are going to be here today. So we have a lot to cover. We're going to talk about why we're covering tips and tricks. We're going to cover keyboard shortcuts, preferences, and personalization. We also have some tips to review with core functionality in the system and just the technology, as well as some best practices. The why tips and tricks. It may seem obvious that everybody wants to be a bit better at using NetSuite, right? But there's a couple of reasons why we want to cover some of these items that are almost like little secrets that the pros know. But also, when you started with NetSuite, as you know, if you went through the implementation, it's really hard. You have a lot going on, and you really focus on just getting the system up and running. So you don't always spend the time to make it work for you, set up the preferences the way you want to. You just keep thinking, oh, I'll do that later when I get more settled. So we're going to go over these tips with you today and hopefully make your life just a little bit easier. So let's get into the system and start off with some keyboard shortcuts. So I think anything that's going to make your life a little bit easier because you've got tips and tools at your disposal is fantastic. And one thing that you do in a finance system is you're working with dates a lot. You're going to have a date field in every single record, basically in NetSuite. So when you're working in dates, you can use some keyboard shortcuts. So in any date field, you could press T, and that's going to put in today's date. If you needed to put in yesterday's date, you just simply click Y, and that's going to populate yesterday's date. Now, if I'm working in the future, I can go ahead and do a Shift T for tomorrow's date. That's going to bring that in there. And if I'm working and needing to put in the last day of the month, you just press M, and that's going to bring it to the last day of whatever the current month is. It doesn't matter what date it is, if it's 28th or 31st, it's going to go ahead and put that date in for you. Few other keyboard shortcuts to get to is that global search. And you know that global search is really a lifeline where you can search for vendor transactions, really everything there. And instead of having to use your mouse and click in there, what you can do is just press Alt G, and that's going to go ahead and put our cursor right in the global search bar, and you're ready to go and keep rocking with it. Now, you can search for any records in NetSuite using the global search, but you should be taking advantage of these, of using prefixes to speed up your search. So, for example, if you're looking for a contact, you can type in CON : and that's going to filter down based on that record type. You can search for a customer by using CUS, or an employee, or even an estimate. But I would like to point out, for example, invoice, INV. Occasionally, you might actually need to use a fourth character. So, for example, yeah, INV would be for invoice. However, what happens if you also have inventory in your system? So you might need to type INVE versus just INV for an invoice. Typically, I tend to use just 3 characters. That tends to be my default, but you can use as few as 1 and then just add more characters as you need to narrow down that list in the search. Make it easy, keep it simple, so take advantage of these prefixes. Now we also have the ability to do some wildcard searches. And so this is going to actually add a lot more power into your global search as well, versus having to be so specific in what you're looking for. So you can see if you do need to have an exact match, we have the ability to put the quotations around that, and that will give you an exact match. Now, the percent sign is really our most commonly used wildcard, and that stands for any character. So you would be able to put in a percent sign, and then any codes in there, for example, if we put in INV 40% sign, then you're going to get all invoices with those numbers in there. So it makes it easy to increase the values that you're looking for. Now, the underscore, that's going to replace a single character in a particular data set. Where I really like to use this one is when I can't remember how to spell something. I can't remember if it's an H or an S, so I type in C underscore UTE and then I get my answer. You could actually use two underscores together to find a word, like in this example where I'm looking for the word Pacific. And then or rather OR, is going to allow you to do that or search. So it applies some logic into the search. Now, the key thing, you do have to make it capital letters. So it has to be in capital O, capital R. If you type it in lowercase, it's not going to work. It's going to treat it as if it's a word. So the or is what's going to bring that into effect with your wildcards here. Okay, so next up, if you want to do a search into a new window now, I'm definitely a big fan of taking advantage of browser functionality. So, of course, you can right click and choose that you want to open in a new window tab. But for saving time, hold the control key down and just click on the link, and that's going to open a new tab for you. But you can also just put an extra colon in the search. And in this example, if we now press enter, that's going to bring those results into a new window for you. So that's just, again, taking advantage of browser functionality and let you take advantage in multitasking, being able to use Chrome tabs, etc. Now let's talk about getting into some recent records. There's really two ways that you're able to see your recent records. You can hover over that recent record button up here in the left-hand corner, and that's going to show you everything that you've recently viewed or edited. And that's your 12 most recently accessed records. Another option is to be able to click where it says all recent records, and that's actually going to give you a broader list than just the 12 most recently accessed records. But it's great if you just need to quickly go back to something that you were recently in without having to use the global search. And a lot of people really kind of aren't aware that that's there in the upper left corner. And it's just, I have a tendency to close things out quickly. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I needed to look for that again. And right there, I can easily get back to it without having to really search everywhere, which kind of leads us to our next thing, shortcuts. Okay, so just like you have browser favorites, we have a shortcut menu in NetSuite, and this is where you can save things that you get into most. So it looks just like the browser, it's a little star, and when we click on the star, you'll see that there's the ability to set up shortcuts, and depending on what page you're on, you just click it and it's going to say add to shortcuts. So that's a really great tool to help you in your day-to-day. One piece of advice that I would also suggest is that you choose that you want to open it in a new window. That way, you never risk opening it right in the middle of whatever you're doing. Another piece that is also cool about this is how you have the portlets on your dashboard. Well, you can have a shortcut portlet on your dashboard. Now, it's the exact same things that you're going to see in the shortcuts list that we're seeing right here on the screen. But what I want to talk about is the fact that you can also link to external websites. So if you have those set up, you can choose that as an external URL. So if you need to commonly go to your bank to be able to look up transactions, go ahead and create a link in NetSuite. It just saves you one step by keeping it all centralized on your dashboard. Make it easy, make it simple, keep it at your fingertips. So that's really awesome. Keyboard shortcuts and general shortcuts. Let's talk about your preferences and personalization now. Now, while I work in the NetSuite standard blue theme all the time, you may not want to do that. You might want to work in the color scheme of your company, or you could easily also pick from some of the other standard colors. And I like to use colors predominantly if I have different roles. So my admin role, I tend to make red, and my other role that I work in on a normal basis, I keep to a color that I like because I want to be flagged if I'm in a role that I don't typically work in. So that's how I use colors. Now, I have to admit, some of the color choices may not always be the best. So try them out. Make sure that they're not going to blind you or that you can read them. But there are a ton to choose from, and it's simple to just make the selection here and you can personalize it. Now, in terms of personalizing your dashboard, you've gotten some great dashboards out of the box with NetSuite, but maybe you've been using NetSuite for a while now and you want to add a few things to your dashboard. You maybe want some new portlets. Maybe you'd like to add in a search that you have. There are so many great tools. So in the upper right-hand corner, click on Personalize, and that's going to bring you to where you can add all of these different portlets. You'll see the standard content. We can see there's also the suite apps and what's currently on your dashboard. So it's very simple to add these in by just clicking on them and then personalizing them the way you would like to see them. And again, your dashboard is your lifeline, so let's make it work for you and let it help you drive your day. As you may also know, NetSuite delivers two major releases a year. So twice a year, you're going to have this portal notice automatically pop up on your screen. And that's going to let you know when that new release is coming. Okay, and let's say that you remove it because it does take up a little bit of space, but you want to get back to it. You'll just click on that personalized menu and then select the new release portlet. And that's going to bring you back to the new release portlet. And it's a great place to find out what's coming, take advantage of those sneak peeks, and learn what new functionality NetSuite is going to be providing for you. So just to recap, you'll see that pop up automatically twice a year, and it's usually about 45 to 60 days before you'll be upgrading. Now, some other tools that we have for you, for example, here, the navigation portlet. Here, you're able to shortcut your processes by roles that you can see. So currently I have this set that I'm showing all my controller shortcuts. And so now let's say from the drop down, you'll see that I can choose from all my different roles. So maybe I want to see inventory manager. So there are different sets of all the shortcuts and paths just to make it a bit easier to drive everything from your dashboard for you. Okay, how do you quickly get to things or reports that you commonly need? As you see, we have some inventory reports showing here, and with a click, we can drill into it. Now, if you're also one of our customers that have multiple subsidiaries, you can use the subsidiary navigator, which is the suite app that you can have, and that's going to allow you to see all of your subsidiaries. And from here, what will happen is when you first launch into NetSuite, it's going to be in a consolidated view at that parent level. But in the middle of my day, maybe I'm only entering bills for one of my subsidiaries. I can click on the subsidiary there, and that's going to adjust all of my dashboards, my KPIs, and those are now going to be filtered to the transactions based on the subsidiary. So essentially, giving myself a restricted view of my dashboard simply by using that navigator. And then when I'm ready to go back to consolidate it, I click on the parent company, and that's going to then refresh my dashboard again to show me all of those details. Now, I don't have little flags in here or a naming convention, but obviously in your instance, that would be set up as the company names in the different regions. So a lot of great information. And when you're entering, let's say you're entering vendor invoices or vendor bills, and you click on that restriction, then it means you're only going to see those vendors and it's going to default to that subsidiary. So it's going to streamline your data entry process as well. And that's just a great app to throw onto your dashboard. We've talked about dashboards and we've added a few things. And so we've taken up some real estate. So you do have the ability to collapse and expand the dashboard simply by clicking on the portal title. So you can double click and that's going to open and close it. Now you can also drag them around and reposition them on the screen so that things that you want prioritize are at the top. Okay, so now what happens though if you need to know the internal ID of a transaction or even a record? By default, your internal IDs tend to be turned off, but if you're able to turn those on, and what we're going to do is really go into our preferences and go to your home, set preferences, and on the general tab, you'll be able to select the box that says show internal IDs. Now, why are these going to be important? Well, you're going to be able to see that field ID, and you can see an example here that the field ID is entity ID, and this is where updating records via a CSV that will know what field we want to map it to, because it's going to come into our mapping. It's also going to help you if you're adding a search and you're just having trouble finding the field. That entity ID is going to help you. Oh, and that's what it's called because sometimes we do change labels when we're going to the implementation. So this matching your terminology, but that underlying ID doesn't change. Okay, so we'll be able to take care of utilizing that. And anytime you turn on those internal IDs, they are going to automatically add a new column in all of your searches, and it's going to put that ID field in there. So being able to sort, because it is numeric, as you add new transactions or new records, you'll be able to sort, and the most recent one is going to be your most recently created records, so it makes it easy to find. And I just mentioned about renaming records. Well, what if you called your vendors suppliers and you would like NetSuite to reflect the way that you are calling them? So you're able to do that by simply going into Setup, Company, and then rename record/transactions. Now, I will tell you that you need to have administrator rights to go into this. So if you don't have that right, check with your admin and see if they'll give you the rights. And then you can go in and change and make the terminology changes, and that's going to pass through onto all of your forms and reports. Even your menu is going to change. So if you change it from vendors to suppliers, that's going to switch. Now, keep in mind, this is a global change. It's going to impact all users. It's not going to be something that just you will see. So it's something you definitely want to confirm before you make that global change there. Now, let me do a little throwback to talking about those global search prefixes. Those global search prefixes are driven simply based on what you've set in here. So if I typed in, say for example, I changed my naming convention to be suppliers, I will now need to type in SUP colon when I'm using that global search to make sure that I'm putting the correct data there. Now let's dive into some functional tips. So taking a look at some functionality called saved searches. Now, saved searches are really key, and you're using them every single day, whether you know it or not. Because let's say you get a list of customers, a list of transactions, by default, that is a saved search. And so you're able to customize that view and can use those searches on your dashboards. You can also trigger email alerts. So in your search, you can say, I need to be notified when a new record is created or when a record meets a certain threshold. You can set marketing groups. They can be used in scripts. I have it on my own personal dashboards because we use NetSuite. So I probably have 4 searches that I use on my dashboard, and it helps me drive my day to day. So they are really key, and I will say take advantage of training on saved search. There are great resources available, great guides, and they really give you a powerhouse at your fingertips for information. Now, inline editing actually comes into play with our searches as well. So you'll see that here I'm in a list view looking at my items, and there's a box that says edit. So it's currently grayed out, and when you have that turned on, that is going to trigger what is called inline editing. And you'll notice on some of the columns here, they have a little pencil now. So those with a pencil mean that you can edit it right there. Now, while we're editing it, if you enter data and then press tab and you move off it, you have saved that change. It's instant. And because this is global, so you know on cloud-based, there's no undo button. So if you do something and like, whoops, I accidentally, for example, named my display name something wrong, I can always go into edit, look at the audit trail, and easily correct that. So inline editing is just a great way to do some quick editing without having to open every individual record as you're doing some updates. It's a nice little streamlined tool to kind of help out with what you're doing. All right, so next up is we have our user guides, help in suite answers. I've actually been in tech a number of years now, and normally help is something that most customers complain about, that there's not enough, but NetSuite is amazing. Here you have field help. When you're on forms, you can simply click on the name of it, and that's going to give you a little pop-up and say, oh, this is what this field means. And if you click on help in the upper right corner, when you're on a page, it's going to take you to the NetSuite Help Center. And depending what page you're on, if you say on a purchase order, it's going to open help relating to a purchase order so that I know how to enter that. And the same thing with reports. If you're on a report, maybe like an income statement, and you hit help, it's going to take you to how to read that report. So great information. So there isn't just the help, there are user guides that you'll see have a link here, and these are all wonderful PDF guides that are going to show you again tons of details, great information, and then you'll be able to also go to Suite Answers where you'll get some additional help. If you haven't used our mobile app, take a look at it. We have it available for iPhone and Android. And this is for creating expense reports, being able to quick access KPIs. There are some great functionality available within the app. It's free, so just go download it, check it out. It's going to use your NetSuite login to get you in there. Now let's shift gears a little and talk about a few technology tips. So how things are working, you're having a day, maybe things are going a bit slow for you. If you double click on the Oracle NetSuite logo on the left-hand corner, you'll be able to see the performance details. And if I'm looking here at network, this is where I can see, is it my side? Because sometimes my network is running a little low. So if I have a bad connection, I can check out and see what's going on and see how fast my pages are loading. Okay, so you'll be able to kind of see what's happening there. So that's a great tool for analyzing performance, but there's also the NetSuite Status Monitor. If you go to status.netsuite.com, you're able to see is there any challenges happening with NetSuite, and you'll notice here that there's been a lot of application requests and our average uptime is 99.98%. But you'll be able to see across different locations what is happening. If there's any challenges, you'll also be able to see sort of a historical record, and you'll also be able to access kind of the application monitoring or APM tool, and that's going to show you like on your concurrencies what we have in terms of an error rate, what do we have by details, by date. Great info to see tech-wise how things are going. Okay, so how do we know what's happening with our licensing? So as an administrator, you can also go into your setup, company view, billing information, and on the billing components, that's going to show you what licenses you have. So you'll be able to see all the details related to your licenses. Now, let's wrap up with a few things on best practices. The very first thing, I hope all of you have a sandbox. So there are actually two options for you. You can do a sandbox, and that's where you would want to do all of your testing. If you have something new you want to do in your system, you don't want to do that in your live production environment, that's for sure. So you'd want to do it in your sandbox, but maybe you want to have an extra account where you just test out development. Or maybe you have a developer that you want to hire, but you don't want them to see access to your private company information. You can actually set up a separate development account as well, and that does not have any of your company information. So the second piece I want to talk about was the Learning Cloud support. So this is new, and a lot of people haven't heard about this. I think everyone knows that NetSuite have had training available for a while. Some of you know have online videos and online learning, but a lot of folks would just simply use the information that was available in Suite Answers. Well, now you don't have to do that anymore. There's a Learning Cloud support pass, and it's available for every single person that uses NetSuite in your environment today. So not only does that include online learning, but it gives you access directly to some of the NetSuite education and success advisors. This is just a quick photo or a screenshot of what it looks like when you log in. I like that one because you can see that there are technical classes as well as non-technical classes. There's really something for everybody. And I think that just about wraps up the tips and tricks for today. If you do have any questions or any other tips or tricks you would like to share with us, please send them on to me. Feel free to use the chat. And like I said, this session is recorded, so you can share it with your colleagues. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for attending today. Stay safe, and we'll chat soon. Thanks.